Hi there fellow WordPress developers, it's Mark here from Highrise Digital and another WordPress related hints and tips video for you here. Now in this video what we're going to look at is, have you ever find yourself doing the same things once you've installed WordPress? For example, removing the sample page, removing the Hello World post, adding a primary navigation menu, creating some users that you want to use for the sites, and you do the same things all the time, every time you install WordPress. Well, in this video, I'm going to show you how you can automate some of those tasks using a feature of WordPress that we'll get onto. So let's get started. So let's just go to our WordPress website. Now, what happens when we do that? Obviously, we hit this, and then we get the install feature that comes up on the screen, which basically says, "Okay, you've put your database connection details in, and let's go and install WordPress." Now, what I'm going to show you is that WordPress has a set of hooks and filters on the install. So what happens is once WordPress has finished installing a new WordPress installation, it runs a hook called WP install, which we've actually got down here at the bottom. Let me just make that much bigger so it's easy to read. So we're going to add an action, a function to the WP install hook, which is then going to run after WordPress has finished installing everything. So that means it's got the database tables installed, it's done all its bits and bobs, and then it's kind of ready, it's finished the installation, and then what we can do is ask it to do some other stuff. So here I'm just saying on WP install, run the HD setup on install function, which is this one above, and I'll talk you through it now. So we've created a setup on install, and that actual setup gets past the new user that was registered when the install was created. So if we go back to this screen, you're asked to set a username and password in here and so on, and this is a new user details, and that gets passed to our function. So if we wanted to do something with that user, we could do. For example, we could assign that as the author of a page, etc. I'll do that, look at that in a second. So what we've done here is, the first thing I'm going to do is create some users. So let's say you've got a team of 3 or 4 people and you want to create their user accounts on the install of WordPress. So what I've done is I've created an array up here at the top. So we're going to create a new username called Mark. The email address is email@example.com. And then what we're going to do is we're going to check the owner of the install, and if they are in this array, we're going to remove them because we don't want to add them twice. They've already got an account because they were the one that actually did the install. So we'll remove them from there, and then we loop through each of the users we want to add. We generate a password for that particular user, and then we use the WP insert user function, passing it an array of data, what we want the login to be, what the URL is, what the password is, what the email is, and what the role should be. So in this case, we're setting them all as administrators, and once that runs, that will go ahead and insert each of those users into the database for us. Now, the next thing we have to do, I always like to delete the Hello World and sample page posts and pages that are created by WordPress by default. We never use them, so they always have the ID of 1 and 2. So the post, I think, is Hello World, has got ID 1, and the page has got the value of ID 2. So what we're going to do is use the WP delete post command to remove them using their ID. And then most of the sites we work on, we create like a news page, which is the archive of posts, and we also create a home page, which is set as the home of the website rather than showing the latest blogs. So we're now going to do that by inserting a post, and we pass this function an array of the post title, which is news, what's the type, it's a page, it's a published post, and I'm going to set the author as me, the person that did the install. We pass the author ID into that. Then if that page created successfully, what we want to do is update the option in the database table that sets that page as the page for posts, so that the news page will be the one that's used to list our posts on, so that works nice and easy. And we don't need to go into settings and set that up again. Similarly, we do exactly the same here for homepage, exactly the same way, and if that's successful, we set that option as the page on front, so that when you load the website, that page gets displayed and not your default blog post options. And then we set the value to say we want to use a page to show on the front rather than the blog post. So these are just options that are normally in the settings screens that you tick a box with, but we're just doing them programmatically instead. This is something specific actually to our install, so I'm going to leave that. You wouldn't probably want that at all, so we can get rid of that one. The next thing is handling some navigation menus. So I always have to create like a primary navigation menu in the site. So why don't we just do that itself? So what we're doing here is we're saying create me a new nav menu called primary navigation. We're using the WP create nav menu function. And that function, if successful, returns the ID of that newly created menu. So we're saying if it was created successfully, so if it didn't return a 0 for the ID and it didn't WP error for some reason, then what we want to do here is we want to add the home page and we want to add the newly created news page to that new menu. And to do that, we use the update nav menu item function. We pass it the new ID that we've just created of the menu up here. And then we pass it an array of the items for this particular nav item. So in this case, it's an item called home, etc., etc., and we give it the URL, etc. So that's how that option works. And then that's kind of it. You could do loads of stuff in this particular thing. This is just some examples of pages, users, nav menus. But basically anything that you do on a daily basis when you install WordPress, you could even do things like activating plugins if you know that they're in the plugins folder. All sorts of things you could do just to try and automate and make your life a little easier. And it's all to do with the WP install action hook that gets fired after WordPress has finished its installation. Now in the previous video I talked about WordPress drop-ins and we used a drop-in called DB error. Now there is a drop-in that you can use called install.php. Now the difference between that and what I've discussed here is that the install.php drop-in, it runs before WordPress does its installation. So if you wanted to fire things off before WordPress is installed, you could, for example, create a database and do other things, not necessarily with PHP as well. You could fire other things in there by placing that file in the WP content folder. But because that happens before WordPress is installed, you don't necessarily have everything set up in WordPress and ready to do. Whereas this happens after the install, WordPress is installed, and therefore we've got access to everything that we normally have in WordPress. So why not take a look at this? Go and automate some of the things you do on every site and just speed up your life and make things a bit quicker for yourselves. If you enjoyed this video, then please do consider clicking the like button. Let me know in the comments below if there's anything else you think you could add to this script. And if you want to see more of me rambling on about WordPress hints and tips, then do consider subscribing to this channel. Anyway, until next time, we'll see you soon.